you're not going to, if a fish don't want to bite, you ain't going to make him bite.
The Falling Forward podcast exists to encourage Christians to continue to gain ground in their faith. Please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. And thank you for joining us as we have insightful conversations about never falling back, but falling forward in the Christian faith. You're listening to the Falling Forward podcast, and I'm your host, Dakota Adair. And today's guest is Reagan. Ty is an avid outdoorsman. He has spent most of his life in a tree stand or on a lake somewhere, but Ty uses the outdoors as a platform to tell others about Jesus. The funny thing is, Ty is my father-in-law, a man who has discipled me since I walked into his doors years ago. And the one thing I admire about Ty is how he has placed absolute priority in serving his family and viewing the outdoors as a way to reach other men. It was fun to sit down and just have a wonderful conversation. He shares awesome stories about the men he has met, the opportunities he has had to share his faith, and how if it's just about catching a fish, then you have missed the mark as a follower of Christ. I know this is a conversation that you will enjoy.
Well, early on, it was about in the early years, my younger years, and because it was about the accomplishment, about the game, taking the game, the biggest buck, the most ducks or whatever it was. But the older I got, the older I got, the lazier I got. So, I was picky and choosy about when I wanted to kill a deer, or when if I wanted to mess with dragging it out and taking care of it and all that stuff. But there came a time when I had several conversations. I was a little frustrated with. I felt like I wasn't accomplishing my goals. And I had a conversation with a guy that's probably, I could, and Dakota knows this, I call him my best friend, but he's more like a brother. And he just flat out told me, he said, if you think we fish together to win tournaments and win money, he said, you're fishing with me for the wrong reason. He said, we're fishing together because we are friends and brothers. And it just kind of gave me a different perspective. And I don't even know who's going to hear this, but there'll be probably points in this thing that I get a little emotional and probably cry a little bit. So
Yeah.
But I just changed my perspective on why I was doing it, and then I started seeing all this stuff that God created for us, which was always there. And I've been a believer since I was 11 or 12 years old. But then I just started seeing these things that in the past that I was missing, that God had created. I mean, and it's like I was going in the woods to deer hunt, and the woods had just come alive with God. I mean, it was really neat. And, it didn't matter if I saw a deer, killed one, or went to the lake and caught fish or whatever it was. I mean, it was just, I don't know. It just changed kind of thing. I mean, I guess deep down, if there was a time where you was hunting with a group of guys or a group of buddies, and one of them killed a big deer, I didn't never. It never upset me, but there was a little bit of envy there. Going, God, I wish I could kill a deer like that or whatever. But after that conversation, I mean, it was, I could go hunting with guys I've been hunting with for years, or somebody I never hunted with, or somebody like when I took you, and I can get as excited now for somebody taking a deer, whether it's big, their first deer, whatever it is, or catching fish or whatever it is. I can get as excited about that as if it was me.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's not as big a deal about me taking or catching. It's, I love for somebody to be with me or take somebody, and especially younger generation that's just getting into it, and they kill their first deer. I mean, you don't never see more excitement out of a young man or girl that takes their first deer. I mean, it's awesome.
What is that? What is that? What is that emotion? What's that drive to experience that?
Well, a lot of them, I think. Some of them are like on the opposite end of what I was. I mean, their families, moms, dads, grandparents, they hunted and different things, and and so and a lot of times, like a dad might be, how dads are, they'll be a little harder on you, if you're sitting in a blind with them, be quiet, do this, do. Man, if I take a young kid hunting with me and they're making noise or whatever, make noise, I mean, if it's meant for a deer to walk up and us get a chance to kill it, so be it, I mean, it's meant for it to happen.
So describe that emotion of killing a deer or catching a fish. What is that?
Well, I'm just going to be honest with you. I love to hunt, and I have ever since I started. But if it came down to it and I had to make a choice whether I was going to hunt or if I could hunt or fish, I would fish. It's just I don't know what it is. I've been fishing since I can remember.
Yeah.
And that, like I said, and that comes from my grandmother. My grandmother's, she loves to fish.
Because you do tournament fishing.
Yes.
So what exactly is that? Like, what kind of what has been your past of what you've been involved in as far as tournament fishing?
I've been involved in clubs. I fished BFLs. I fished a national tournament trail called Fishers of Men, and the guy that I fished with, me and him worked together, and it's kind of a funny story. I met him. His name was Gary Anderson, and I met him at work, and he was young, cocky, arrogant, just the type of person that, it's hard for me to deal with. And I always told myself, I said, I'll never get in the boat with him. I said, there's no way I could ever handle being in the boat with him. And one afternoon, I was going to the lake after work to fish, and somehow me and him crossed paths, and before leaving work, and he said, what are you doing this afternoon? I said, I'm going to the lake and going to fish for a little while. And he said, you mind if I tag along? And I couldn't say no. And I'm going to be honest with you, me and him started a partnership that year, and probably is one of the best fishing partners I ever had. Yeah. I mean, Gary was a different person in the boat. I mean, he was just a great, great fisherman. I mean, he really was. And I say was because Gary passed away.
Yeah.
At the age of 40 with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
But me and him fished that Fishers of Men National Tournament Trail. We won our division, qualified for the regional and the national. We went to the regional, and of course we wanted to do well, and we wanted to win it because first place was a brand new bass boat, and we stunk it up at the regional. Came all the way from Douglasville, Georgia, to Sam Rayburn in Texas, and fished a 2-day tournament for the national. And out of 160 boats, we ended up finishing 6th.
Wow.
And but and it just, to me, after once I started fishing with Gary, he never knew my thoughts in my head about him being cocky and arrogant. I'd never get in the boat with him, and I actually apologized to him. He didn't even know. I had to explain to him what I was apologizing to him for and asking for forgiveness for. And, I said, I told myself I'd never get in the boat with you.
Yeah.
But he was a great guy, and I miss him. Yeah, before all that, I used to, if we went to a tournament, it seems like anything else, you're not gonna win every one of them,
Yeah.
And so, but when you go to a tournament and it's a lake you feel like you should do well on, and then you don't do well, I used to beat myself up pretty hard about it, to me, deer hunting's a little bit different than that. You can scout and find this and do that and do all the right things with your scent control and if I'm bow hunting, making sure I shoot and practice but with fishing, it's all about making the right decisions as far as what the fish are doing and making sure you're doing what you need to do, where the fish are transitioning for a certain time of year. And I used to beat myself up bad when I felt like I didn't make the right decisions, and it hurt the outcome of what we did in the tournament and stuff.
Yeah.
I'd harp on it for 2 or 3 days trying to figure out what we did wrong or what I did wrong or what decisions we didn't make right. But now, we go to a lake, we do what we think we need to do, where we need to do it, and if it don't happen, I've done come to the realization that you're not going. If a fish don't want to bite, you ain't gonna make him bite.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm also, I know that, a lot of people, not a lot of people, but I know I've heard people disagree with this, but I don't care what you do, God's involved in every aspect of your life, whether you're in a bass boat, a deer stand, at work, or sitting here doing a podcast. He's involved in it. And until you realize that and you let him do what he's going to do in your life, and quit trying to do it on your own, it's not going to work out anyway,
Well, because it's interesting how you, with every aspect of life, I used to joke around about football. I love football so much. I used to call it the gospel in motion.
Yeah.
Because I could show you the gospel through the game itself, and we can do that in everything in life.
Mm-hmm.
Everything points back to God. And for you to kind of say, even with that, as your attitude was, you can all on your own, and you would work, you'd be hard on yourself. And I think as you got older and matured in your faith, that you kind of that kind of was let go. You kind of let that go. You let the outcome. You gave the outcome to God, and you left it to God. And because what's interesting is as far as when you were younger and everything, is some stories I've heard is how you're more laid back than you used to be.
Yeah. I used to get uptight about. I guess I'm a goal-oriented person, and I'm a perfectionist, and That's probably the two worst personality traits that you could have together and be successful at something, because you're going to be hard on when it don't go like you think. When you think you're doing your best and it don't go like you want it to, you're going to be hard on yourself, and so.
So what about men as far as, I was talking a little bit about Dana, your wife, and everything, and how she's your biggest fan. For men who have kind of made the outdoors your God, one thing I've learned about you is that you have a phenomenal balance and perspective on how you handle your passions and your hobbies. Because a lot of men, that's kind of where they escape, and that the family's usually given the leftovers, and especially God. Because you talked a lot about that, which I always thought was so neat, because there was times where you had a big tournament, a huge tournament, and you wouldn't go because you literally had something with family or some kind of dinner or lunch, and it wasn't even that big of a deal. It's just you put your family before those things, which is something remarkable. And I would love for listeners to hear a little bit about that.
All right. Well, I'm going to start by saying it wasn't always like that. I made my share of mistakes early on in our marriage when it was just me and her before kids and that kind of stuff, where I made some decisions to go fish a tournament or go on a hunting trip when I shouldn't have. I should have made that decision to put family first, whether, even though it was just me and her, and whether it was whatever was going on that weekend, it wasn't always like that. But when we started having, our family started growing, we started having kids. Of course, we had 3 daughters. They were all involved in softball, cheerleading, several different sports here and there, doing different things. And Abby, my oldest one, she did horse riding and all that stuff. So, I had to make that decision that, well, it wasn't really a decision. I knew the whole time that family came first, So, like I said, me and Grant, we've been fishing tournaments together for close to probably 30 years. And, he understands that if I have something going on in the family on the weekend we're fishing a tournament, he's going to have to get another partner for that weekend.
Wow.
So I do it because I would rather spend time with my family. Don't get me wrong, I love to hunt and fish, but I would rather spend time with my girls and my wife, and now my granddaughters, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because I know what I've seen men is that they have their passions, whatever it is. It's working out or cycling or whatever hobby, fishing, outdoors and stuff. Is that they fit their family, and they fit their family in their schedule, and they try to work that out. They don't. They say it.
Yeah.
But they don't actually live it.
Yeah.
I heard this man say, I think his name was Steve Farr, and The Point Man's book by The Point Man. He says that I think the slogan is that many men will die for their family, but not many men will live for them.
Yeah.
Which is a profound statement.
Very profound.
And that's kind of something where if I watched you and learned from you, is that, family is first in your life.
Yeah.
Obviously God, but, obviously God pours out in those relationships. I hate to kind of put God, he's first and family second and country third. But it's really neat how that you kind of talked about that, because you've lived it. I've watched you take up, miss some pretty big events.
Yeah. And, and it don't even have to be a big event. I don't, a lot of men, and I don't want to step on nobody's toes, but I'll go to the mall with my wife and just walk around with her if that's what she wants to do. You know what I'm saying? I don't, I love spending time with her. I mean, we're empty nesters now, so we spend a lot of time together if we don't end up killing each other. No. But, I mean, it just, you're right. I try and keep that balanced, and, there's times that I'm kind of probably going down a bunny trail here, but it's kind of what we're talking about. I mean, I got like Grant. He leases a big tract of land out in Kansas. My brother-in-law, he leases land in Illinois and Kentucky and that kind of stuff. And both of them's invited me to go to these places to hunt. But when they go, they're gone for a week, 10 days, that kind of stuff. And I'm just I've been brutally honest with them. I would love to go to these places and have a chance to see these deer that they're seeing and kill one of these big deer that they're killing and stuff. But I'm a homebody. I get homesick quick.
Yeah.
After 2 or 3 days, I'm ready to cut for the hut and get back to the house. Whether I've killed a deer, caught a fish, or whatever it is. That being gone 7, 10 days away from my family, my wife, my kids, my grandkids, I just don't handle it real well.
Yeah. Well, because I know, man, there's times where I've seen, that'd be hard to leave across the country and everything. But I think it's so neat that one thing I've learned from you is I've talked to many men, outdoorsmen and stuff, and I've always wondered how that is, because when you're involved in hunting or fishing, there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just something it's not golf where you bring your clubs and you go to the course.
Yeah.
Hunting is, you're spending a lot of money investing in equipment, time, tags, all those things to explore, and which is just that balance, not compromising time and with your family, precious moments that you've kind of talked about, how you don't miss that out, and especially since you're a grandfather.
Yeah.
So you have 2 little ones, and so you don't never miss time away from them. But which is encouraging for me as a young, your son-in-law, but as a man learning that it's so easy to forget. Maggie, a lot of times I get caught up with school and everything else as I'm finishing up here in college, and I can see where that my time, my focus can be steered away from what's really important.
And you don't necessarily do it on purpose.
Yeah.
Even whether it's school, working out, hunting, fishing, that kind of stuff. Sometimes you just, men are left-brained, and they just get things out of kilter. We have to bring it back to, sometimes it's something that's mentioned to us by our spouse or something, or maybe it's somebody else, a mentor or something in our lives that mentions it to us. Hey, you might want to check yourself on this,
Yeah, I know. It's just I think it's a good talk for every man to have. And just discuss that. I think it's always going to be a challenge for us as men, especially men who are driven.
Yeah. Which
is good, but you want to invest that energy into the right things.
Yeah.
Which everything is balanced.
I'll share a story. I'm not sure this is a God story, but it's a neat story. There's a tournament that's held every year on Good Friday. That's kind of ironic, but it's on Good Friday on a local lake around the house. And for several years, I fished it with Grant. I fished it a couple times with Grant. I fished it a couple times with Gary, different things. And this one particular Good Friday, I really didn't have plans on fishing it. And at the last minute, I decided I was going to fish it and stuff, but everybody had done kind of got partners and different things. So I asked Abby, my oldest daughter, if she wanted to fish with me. She was like, 10 or 11 at the time. She had been fishing with me a few times, quite a few times. She knew how to, as a 10 or 11-year-old little girl, I mean, I consider her a pretty good fisherman for her age. So she said she would. I bundle her up, and we get to the boat ramp, and my buddies help me get my boat in the water, and I get her all wrapped up. It's in early spring, still kind of cool. And she had her life jacket on. I wrapped a big jacket around her, and I laid her down in the floorboard, and I told her, I said, just stay laid down. I said, we're going to ride down the lake a good ways. And I said, when we get there, you can get up. She said, okay. So I run down the lake, get down there, and I turn the boat off. I get up, throw the trolling motor in the water. She ain't moved. I look over there, she's sound asleep. So I just let her sleep. I went down through there fishing, and I caught 3 or 4 fish. She woke up. She said, Daddy, you caught any fish? And I said, yeah, there's 3 or 4 in the live well. So she gets up, gets her rod, and gets stirring around. I said, hold on. I said, let's run back up the lake. So we go back up the lake, and lo and behold, it's in the spring. Fish are bedding. Get up there in some clear water, and I start finding fish on bed. And we pull in this little creek, and it's a back end of a creek, and it's just, as a fisherman, what looks good for where a bass would be and different things. And I ease up in there, and it's barely wide enough for me to get my boat up in there. I ease up in there and don't see anything, so I spin the trolling motor around. I'm having to back the boat out, and I look straight down under the boat, and there's this bass on bed, and it's just locked on, not moving. And I told Abby, I said, that's a good fish. And I said, it hadn't moved. We can catch that fish. So I start flipping up there. The fish bit. I set the hook. There's a little sandbar to my right. It goes swimming up on the sandbar and spits my jig out. Swims out in the creek channel, swims right back to the bed. I start messing with it. I told Abby, I said, that fish probably not going to bite again. Lo and behold, 3 or 4 flips later, it bites again. I set the hook. It swims up on that same sandbar and spits the dang jig out again. Swims back to the bed. And the whole time, Abby's standing there with a net in her hand, putting pressure on me, going, Daddy, catch that fish. Daddy, catch that fish. Well, I mess with it. Spin the boat around. We fish down the bank a little ways, let it settle down, pull back up there, flip up in there, the fish bites again. I set the hook. This time it swims the other way and swims down the creek channel. I spin the boat around. We get it out in deeper water. She nets the fish. And I knew it was a good fish, especially for the lake we were fishing. Put it in a live well. Ended up catching 3 or 4 more good fish off bed. Got rid of some of them small fish. Get to the scales. All my buddies are there, and they're going, did you catch them? I said, yeah, man, Abby's got a pretty good sack of fish. So we walk up there. We put our fish on the scales, and we had almost 18 pounds of fish. And the fish that I caught off the bed that I lost twice weighed 7.5 pounds. Well, we didn't win the tournament, but we ended up 3rd. Got money for that. Then we got money for big fish. Ended up winning like $1,600.
Wow.
So we get in the truck. Abby's sitting over there, and they pay you in cash. So I went through the envelope, got out $800, and I handed it to her. She said, what is that? And I said, he was my partner today. I said, we split the money. She said, I didn't catch a fish. I said, you may not have, but I said, you netted every one of them for me. So that was pretty neat. And we got pictures, and she talks, I can be talking to somebody about fishing or in a group of people, and she say, Daddy, did you tell them? Even today, she's 24 years old. She'll say, you remember when we caught them fish up there at Altoona? And I said, yep, I sure do.
Wow. It's just neat how stories like that, there's memories. There's so many memories that you have. In a lot of ways,
And, I won't say that wasn't a God story. I know he was involved because he's involved in everything, but, in a lot of ways, with my daughter being with me and her experiencing that, and having a good time and all that stuff. I mean, that was.
Yeah.
But I tell you one other one. I was fishing BFL trail one year as a co-angler. So basically, it's like I was explaining earlier. You go fish these tournaments the Friday evening before the tournament on Saturday. You meet a guy most of these guys you ain't never met in your life, and you're gonna get in the boat with them, spend 8 hours with them on the water. Well, leading up to this, I was in a men's Bible study, and I'd asked them guys to pray for somebody fishing this that if they needed to know God, that I would have the discernment to know that and be able to share with them and different things. Well, this particular tournament, I met this guy on Friday and talked to him. We were fishing Lake Oconee. He was from Florida, and he said he had been up here all week, this and that. Met him at the boat ramp the next morning, got in his boat.
Yeah.
He had a brand new boat. He was having some electrical problems. We had to do some stuff. He was real discouraged. He wasn't ranting and raving, but he was just discouraged.
Yeah.
And he just kept just little comments here and there, not toward me, just about.
It's frustrated.
Yeah. So we get everything situated. We go through safety check and everything passed. So we were sitting out there waiting to blast off. And I asked him, I said, hey, you okay if I pray for us? He said, sure, I'd love that. So I prayed for us. And we blasted off, went way down the lake, started fishing. And for 8 solid hours, this is a God thing. For 8 solid hours, he told me what was going on in his life, how he felt. He was a believer, but how he felt defeated, and how he basically felt like God was out. In so many words, God was out to get him. He didn't want him to succeed. He was actually trying to make it as a professional fisherman.
Yeah.
And so for 8 solid hours, I got to talk to this man. But exactly what you were talking about earlier, about his fishing being his God, and God not being on the throne.
Yeah.
And for a long time after that, we exchanged numbers. He had text me, he had call me. I kept up with him for a long time. And then and I hate to say it, I don't know I tried to call him one day, and the phone number I had been disconnected, so I don't know if he had gotten a new phone number changed or what, and so I lost contact with him. Kevin Mars, I'll never forget him.
Kevin Mars.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome.
But that was a day. I mean, I was fishing, even as a co-angler, I was fishing for $5,000, and didn't really, I mean, I caught fish that day, but didn't really care if I did catch a fish, because I knew I was doing what I was supposed to do.
Yeah, you just speaking into his life.
Yeah,
and you were aware of, you were aware that was happening, that God was allowing you and giving you the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Which is just a wonderful feeling when that happens, when that does happen, which it becomes more than just fishing.
Yeah, it did. I mean, really, that day I didn't, it didn't matter about, I mean, I could have caught 30 pounds of fish. And I mean, I'd have been excited about it, but it would have been minuscule to what went on in that boat that day.
Wow. Have you had a lot of opportunities where you've been able to speak into men's lives? Because, times there's just moments you have, and while you're waiting or just sitting.
Yeah, I mean, Gary, the guy I was telling you about earlier. I mean, a great guy. Had this mentality. I mean, he was raised in a stern Baptist home. I mean, had it shoved down his throat.
Yeah.
And had a sour taste about being a Christian. And because when we fished that Fishers of Men tournament trail, one of the things the rules it said you had to be involved in a local church.
Yeah.
And I asked Gary that when we decided to fish that. I said, I mean, where you stand with that? I asked him. I said, do you go to church regularly, or involved in church in any way? Are you a believer? I mean, and he told me. I mean, he told me a story. He said my mom and dad were at church every time the church doors was open, shoved it down my throat, and I just
became resentful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He said I am a believer. He said I was saved when I was 15 years old. I don't, he said excuse me. And Gary, he at the time was single. He did his share of partying. But he was one of those that believed if you treated people good and did the right thing, you were fine.
Yeah, which is such a false gospel.
Yeah. But I got to speak into his life a lot. Because we spent a lot of hours in the boat together. I got to speak into his life a lot. My partner right now, Grant, my best friend. I say best friend, but I consider him a brother. He's a believer. He's a creaster. He goes to church at Christmas and Easter.
Yeah.
So, every chance I get, he's married. He was single, divorced and single for 18 years. Recently got married in the last couple of years, and I constantly,
speaking to his life.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, I think it's just, I guess for me, is just to see that where God is moving in every aspect of life and everything, and that even in the outdoors world, that God has men that are using that as a platform to glorify Him.
Oh yeah. Well, and I'm, like I said, I love going and getting in a deer stand, or even just going and walking in the woods. I mean, if it's, if it's scouting and just seeing these animals that God created and the things they do, for us to know that they're there and what they're doing in their, pardon the terminology, but circle of life. I mean, like the bucks rubbing trees and leaving scrapes and trying to draw the does to them to breed and that, but, as far as like taking the animals, I mean, I know there's been times where I've taken 3 or 4 deer a year, but as far as our family, 2 deer is fine for us.
Yeah.
But, there's these like shelters and stuff that you can donate a deer to for, to help feed people, and so I don't ever take for granted, or try not to take for granted, the opportunity to pass on a deer or kill one. I'm not going to unnecessarily take one. I'm not just going to shoot one to shoot it, but, sitting out there and in the still, calm woods, I mean, it can be dead quiet, or the wind can be blowing 20 miles an hour, and you can hear that distinct sound of the leaves crunching, and there's no doubt it's a deer walking up. And to see that animal and that creature, and know that God put that specific creature on this earth, not necessarily for us to hunt, but we're given the opportunity to hunt that creature that was created by the same God that sits on the throne for us. You know? I mean, I don't know. And it's not just the deer. I mean, I might sit out there 4 or 5 hours and not see a deer, but there's other things. You see squirrels and birds and all kind. I've seen some crazy things in the woods.
So remarkable.
Yeah. That you just go, without God, none of this would be possible.
Yeah. Well, I think when I met you, I've always been around outdoors, being from Louisiana and having family there, and my Uncle Danny, who, big Cajun, loves outdoors and everything. It's just, growing up and kind of being indoors and this kind of in the city and not really being exposed to the wildlife, that I'm fascinated because there's more out there that I just don't really understand.
Yeah.
And when you're a hunter or you're a fisherman, there's a different perception that y'all have about that. And they all have this sense of responsibility to take care of it and to honor, like you said, what God has created.
Yeah.
And it's bigger. It's more than the outdoors.
Yeah.
Well, Ty, I think it's cool to have you on here. I know I told you, hey, I want to sit down and do a podcast. It's not an interview. It's just a conversation.
Yeah.
I want to see where it goes. And I think for a lot of listeners who can resonate with this message of just kind of your passions and everything, that it's more that you look at outdoors, there's more to that.
Yeah.
That it all comes back to God. Everything points back to God. And so I think for some of the stories and the comments that you've made, I think it'll resonate with a lot of listeners.
Oh, yeah.
And thank you for coming on, and thank you for letting me marry your daughter.
Well, you're welcome. For both.
She's ready for the wildlife more than I am. So it's kind of, and she has this appreciation as well, which is different, because her dad, y'all made sure that your daughters were involved in that, and you let them enjoy that as well. But anyways, this is a lot of fun. I've enjoyed that you did this.
I have to. I've enjoyed it too.
All right, guys, we're out. Dakota Adair here. You have just listened to the Falling Forward Podcast. Connect with us at fallingforwardpodcast.com to join the conversation, access show notes, or reach out to today's guest. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. It is very much appreciated. The song used in this podcast is called Stunts by Artur Nelson. Find his music on iTunes or Spotify. And thank you for listening, and remember to keep falling forward.
Hold on tight. These motions are making